She entered the grand music hall with her head bowed low, just another unseen figure in a faded uniform. No one noticed her, unless they needed someone to mock, to belittle for their own amusement. But when they cruelly ordered her to play the piano, expecting a joke, what followed left the entire room stunned. By the time her hands lifted from the keys, the woman they once ridiculed had become someone they would remember forever. Emily Johnson moved silently between the gleaming marble pillars of the Preston Music Conservatory. The soft squeak of her worn sneakers stood in sharp contrast to the elegant Chopin drifting from nearby practice rooms. At 28, she wore the beige custodial uniform with quiet pride, her dark hair tied back in a simple ponytail. Her motions were precise, practiced, emptying trash bins, wiping surfaces, polishing what others overlooked. 3 years she had worked here, invisible more often than not, just another background figure, like the dust she cleared from antique picture frames. She had long grown used to the way students and faculty's eyes passed right over her, never really seeing her. In the grand hallway, she paused to straighten a slightly askew portrait of a stern-faced composer. Her hands, calloused from years of cleaning agents, moved with a delicate grace no one ever noticed. "Emily, can you handle the reception area today? The foundation board is coming in," her supervisor called out, barely glancing up from his clipboard. "Yes, Mr. Collins," she answered softly. As she walked into the grand reception space, sunlight poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows. In the corner sat the majestic Steinway, a centerpiece of every recital and fundraiser. For a fleeting second, something in her changed. A soft flicker of longing crossed her face. In the reflection of a polished brass lamp, she saw herself, 15 years younger, seated at a similar piano, a world of music and dreams stretching ahead like an unwritten symphony. But that was before life took a different turn. Before love, not ambition, led her down another path. She gave a gentle shake of her head and returned to her duties. The past was gone. This was her life now. And she had come to terms with it, or so she reminded herself every morning. Victoria Parker swept into the reception hall, her heels clicking sharply against the marble. At 53, she ran the conservatory with the same fierce precision she once brought to Europe's most prestigious stages. Her navy suit was sharp, her silver bob immaculate, an image of success and authority, polished to perfection. "These chairs need to be exactly 1 inch apart. Not this sloppy arrangement," she snapped, barely looking at Emily. "The Jefferson Foundation expects perfection." "Yes, Mrs. Parker," Emily said instantly, moving to correct the chairs. Across the room, Samantha Reed watched with a thin smirk. As the conservatory's star piano instructor, Samantha was known for producing winners and demanding excellence. "Victoria, do remind the staff to use the service corridors once the guests arrive," she said pointedly, her voice loud enough to ensure Emily heard. "Last time, I saw some of them wandering around during the Chopin competition." Emily's cheeks flushed, but her hands didn't falter. She kept adjusting the chairs, her expression composed. These quiet humiliations had become part of her routine, just like wiping down the trophies that weren't hers to win. Later that afternoon, as Emily polished the brass handrail along the sweeping grand staircase, she paused, her ears catching the sound of a struggling piano student. Through a partially open door, she spotted a young girl, maybe 12, fumbling through a challenging passage. Frustration etched across her face as she stumbled over the same notes again and again. Without thinking, Emily whispered softly, "Try loosening your wrist on the arpeggios." The girl turned, startled, just as Samantha appeared beside her like a storm. "Did you just try to teach my student?" Samantha's voice sliced through the air like glass. "I'm sorry, You just what? Thought your experience as a janitor gave you the authority to teach piano." Her laugh was cold and cutting. "Stick to what you know, Emily, trash bins and mops." Emily dropped her eyes, silent, as the door slammed shut in her face. She returned to polishing, her shoulders slightly more slouched than before. What Samantha never saw, what no one saw, were Emily's fingers moving subtly across the rail. Quietly, precisely, she played the notes the student had been struggling with. She corrected them, perfected them, completed the passage in a ghostly, silent performance, one no one would ever witness. The day of the annual fundraising gala arrived with a whirlwind of preparation. The conservatory sparkled, every detail pristine, every chair aligned with exact symmetry, all thanks to Emily's quiet efforts. Soon, The halls would echo with laughter and clinking glasses as wealthy patrons gathered to decide the fate of future music programs with their donations. In the reception hall, Emily worked unnoticed when Samantha came storming through the double doors, phone pressed to her ear, her expression full of panic. "What do you mean you're in the hospital?" she barked into the phone. "The gala starts in an hour, Olivia. You can't be serious." A pause. Her face darkened. "Food poisoning. Today of all days." She ended the call, her face a storm cloud. Victoria rushed over, sensing disaster. "What happened?" "Olivia can't perform. She's in the ER." Victoria's hand shot to her pearl necklace. "But she's our main act. The Jefferson Foundation specifically requested Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody." "I know that," Samantha hissed. "And none of my other students are ready for that piece." Jason Miller, a young teaching assistant known for always greeting Emily with a kind good morning or a quiet thank you, stepped forward hesitant. "Mrs. Parker, I may have a suggestion." Desperation glimmered in Victoria's eyes. "Go on, Jason." He hesitated, then nodded slightly toward Emily, who was quietly dusting a nearby display case. "I've heard someone else play that piece. Beautifully, actually." "You mean Professor Williams?" "He's out of town," Victoria said. "Surely you're not suggesting one of the graduate students?" "No," Jason replied. "I'm suggesting Emily." The silence was instant and deafening. Samantha was the first to break it, laughing sharply. "The janitor? You can't be serious." "I've heard her after hours," Jason insisted, undeterred, "when she thought no one was around. She's phenomenal." Victoria and Samantha exchanged looks of disbelief before both turned to Emily, who had frozen in place, duster hanging midair. "Is this true?" Victoria asked. "You play piano?" Emily slowly lowered the duster, her cheeks flushing. "Yes, ma'am." "And you believe you can play Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody?" Samantha scoffed. Emily looked her straight in the eyes, for the first time in 3 years. "Yes, ma'am. I can." Victoria studied her, really saw her, maybe for the first time ever. "You honestly believe you could perform? Tonight? At the gala?" Emily stood tall, surrounded by the hum of last-minute preparations, completely still in the spotlight she never asked for. Before she could respond, Samantha jumped in again, dripping with disdain. "Let me get this straight. You think you can step in for Olivia Sanders? The girl who's trained with elite instructors since she was 5. Emily's answer was calm. "I know the piece." Her uniform still clung to her like a label, her hands still carried the scent of cleaning agents. Hands that moments ago had been scrubbing stair railings and emptying trash bins. "Well," Richard finally said, a flicker of curiosity lighting up his face, "this is certainly unexpected." Samantha leaned in toward Victoria and Richard, lowering her voice just enough to pretend Emily couldn't hear. "This might actually work in our favor. Think about it. We spin it as a community outreach moment. If she's terrible, we laugh it off as a quirky emergency. If she's decent, we look charitable for giving the help a chance at the spotlight." Victoria's expression shifted, calculating, intrigued. "The donors might find it charming," she mused. "A little heartwarming chaos before we explain Olivia's absence." Emily stood silently, no longer a person, just a tool in their plan. Spoken about, not spoken to. Their words wrapped around her like a cold wind, stripping away her dignity with each phrase. "It's settled then," Victoria said, turning to Emily with rehearsed cheer. "You'll play one piece, Liszt. That's all." Emily looked her straight in the eye. "And if I refuse?" The question surprised even herself. Victoria's smile hardened. "Then we'll need to reevaluate your position here. Budget cuts, you understand." That moment wasn't just about music. It was about everything, her identity, her self-worth, the part of her soul she'd hidden away for years. Would she shrink again? Or finally stand tall? We're just a few hearts away from reaching 1,000 subscribers. If Emily's courage inspires you, hit that subscribe button now. Be part of a community where stories like hers are never forgotten. The grand hall glowed beneath glittering chandeliers as the city's elite took their seats. The conservatory's finest patrons whispered behind jeweled programs, unaware of the quiet storm brewing backstage. In the wings, Emily stood alone, still in her beige uniform, the name tag Emily J. gleaming under the harsh light like a scarlet letter. Victoria stepped up to the microphone, voice smooth and polished. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we have a slight change to tonight's program." She paused dramatically. "Our scheduled pianist had an unfortunate emergency. However, in the spirit of community, we present a special performance." Soft murmurs and confused glances pass through the room. One of our maintenance staff has kindly volunteered to demonstrate how music can touch lives, regardless of background or training. The words fell like a backhanded compliment wrapped in velvet. As Emily walked onto the stage, a few people chuckled softly from the back rows. Near the curtain, Samantha crossed her arms, her smirk smug, like a cat watching its trapped mouse squirm. Emily sat at the Steinway. Its polished black surface reflected her face, filled with uncertainty. She hadn't played for anyone in years, only for herself, or in echoes of memory. In the front row, Richard leaned toward the woman beside him and whispered with a smirk, "Well, at least this should be entertaining." Emily closed her eyes. She let the world fade away, the stage, the whispers, the judgment. And in that silence, she found herself once more beside her grandmother, on a sunlit afternoon. The old woman's hands were twisted by arthritis, but her voice had been strong. Music isn't about who the world says you are. It's about who you are when the world disappears. Emily's fingers touched the keys, and in that moment, the hall transformed. Not the hesitant plunking they expected. Not a performance to endure with polite applause, but music. Confident, commanding, alive. The opening notes of Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2 filled the room with fire and grace. Emily's hands, once used to scrub floors, moved like lightning and silk. Every note was clear. Every phrase electric. The room fell silent, stunned. She told a story through music, one she had never been allowed to tell with words. The whispers died. The smirks froze. 200 souls held their breath. As the piece soared through its most demanding passages, Emily's body swayed with the music. Face transformed, every note becoming a piece of her soul made visible. The playful sections danced with whimsical grace. The thundering crescendos shook the hall, echoing against marble and glass like waves crashing against stone. In the third row, an elderly patron quietly wiped away tears. At the back, a renowned music critic leaned forward, stunned. His face bore the look of someone witnessing something rare and real. Victoria stood frozen, the color drained from her face. Samantha's hand clenched the curtain, so tightly her knuckles turned white. And Jason watched, quietly vindicated, truth revealing itself, note by perfect note. Then, the final chord thundered. 3 heartbeats of silence. Then the eruption. Applause broke like a dam. Hesitant at first, then rising unstoppable. A standing ovation rolled through the hall. Cries of bravo echoed through the air. People who had braced themselves to endure a janitor's amateur attempt were now cheering. Faces alight with wonder, shame, and awe. Emily sat motionless for a moment, overwhelmed. Then she rose and offered a quiet, humble bow. The applause only grew louder. From the audience, a tall man pushed through the crowd, David Thompson, a respected conductor. He called out, "Wait." Emily paused. "Young lady, where did you study?" The spotlight hit her uniform again, the name tag still visible. "I didn't, sir," she said. "Not formally." Gasps and murmurs rippled. David stepped closer, stunned. "That's impossible. Your technique. Your interpretation." "My grandmother taught me," Emily said softly. Her voice carried across the room like a warm breeze after a storm. "Margaret Johnson?" he asked, eyes wide. "The Margaret Johnson? National Symphony in the 70s. Emily nodded. "She raised me after my parents died. We couldn't afford conservatory tuition, but she taught me everything she knew." Victoria stepped in, her polished voice back. "How fascinating. What a wonderful human interest story." "It's not a story," Emily replied, quietly but firmly. "It's my life." The dignity in her voice silenced the room more powerfully than any outburst. "I was accepted to Juilliard 15 years ago," she said, now looking directly at Samantha. "But my grandmother had a stroke that same week. I stayed to care for her. By the time she passed, the opportunity was gone." David nodded slowly. "You took a job here to stay close to the music." "Yes." That single word, so simple, held a universe. Of sacrifice. Of dreams postponed. Of love. Of grit. In that moment, under the harsh spotlight, Emily Johnson stopped being the woman who cleaned the halls. She became undeniably, irrevocably human in their eyes. Later, the elegant reception hall buzzed with excitement. Emily stood at the center, surrounded by patrons who had never even looked at her before. Now they couldn't stop. "I've never heard the middle section played like that," said a silver-haired woman who had funded the East Wing. "So much depth." Emily accepted their praise with quiet grace, neither shrinking from it nor basking in it. Across the room, Victoria moved through the crowd with her usual poise, spinning the narrative. Of course, we recognized her potential. Our outreach programs are designed to uncover talent like this, she insisted to a major donor. Nearby, Samantha stood alone by the refreshments, her usual group of admirers suddenly distant. She watched her students, gather around Emily, their admiration unmistakable. Jason stepped up to Emily, offering her a glass of sparkling water. "I told you they'd be amazed," he said gently. "Thank you for speaking up," Emily replied. Not many people would have. Before he could answer, David Thompson returned, this time with Elizabeth Chun, head of the Jefferson Foundation. "Miss Johnson," Elizabeth began, "we believe talent should never be limited by circumstance. We've been searching for someone to lead a new initiative for underprivileged youth, someone who understands excellence and barriers." David added, "The role includes teaching and performing. Your story could inspire so many who feel the doors are closed to them." Emily's eyes widened. What had begun as humiliation had turned into something far greater. She noticed Richard watching from afar, his expression unreadable. The power in the room had shifted, like tectonic plates realigning after an earthquake. Everyone could feel it. 3 months later, Emily walked the same hallways she had once cleaned. No fairy tale. No princess transformation. Just slow, steady change. The kind that matters. She still wore simple clothes, but no longer a uniform. Now she carried sheet music, not mops. Her role with the Jefferson Foundation's Music Within Reach program gave her the chance to mentor students just like she had once been, talented, overlooked, and dreaming. She passed the reception desk. Victoria gave her a curt nod. Emily returned it. Not warmth, perhaps, but mutual respect. And sometimes that was enough. In the conservatory's practice room, 8 teenagers waited. Kids from neighborhoods with no pianos. Schools with no music funding. Eyes both hopeful and guarded. Emily smiled, sitting at the piano. "My grandmother used to say, 'Music isn't about who you are to the world,'" she began, her fingers poised on the keys. "It's about who you are when the world falls away." She began to play, not to prove anything, but because it was her truth. And as her students leaned in, wide-eyed and silent, Emily finally understood. The greatest act of courage is simply being who you are, in a world that tries to make you invisible. If this story moved you, help us reach our goal of 1,000 subscribers. Like, comment, and subscribe to join our community of storytellers. Have you ever been underestimated? Judged by appearances? Share your story below. You never know who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places. Until next time, keep looking beyond the surface.